Your DNA is a right-handed double helix made up of the...
Do me a favor, watch this full video of this girl and what she's explaining. And when you're done, go watch the show, Who Are the 144,000, where I guess appeared on Sam Tripoli's podcast called Zero on samtripoli.com. It's also on Rokfin. But anyways, in this show, we were talking about many things spirituality related, and where I broke down how our DNA is code to everything that's going on right now. It's code to who we are, and it is also key to who God is and how he made us. In that show, I spoke about how the name of God was written into our very DNA, as this lady is explaining. And I also spoke about the 72,000 nucleotides in our DNA that are from our mother, and the 72,000 nucleotides in our DNA that are from our father. With the double helix DNA, that's 144,000 nucleotides in human DNA. Now, remember when the Queen of England, who just passed away, had her birthday in February of this year? If you recall, she put her hand on a crystal ball in the yard, and then a triple helix lit up in the yard, signifying the changing of human DNA to this hybrid form, what she's talking about, the fallen angel. Let's go back to the Bible, the Nephilim, as in the days of Noah. Everything is about our DNA. That is our identifying mark of children of God. The purebloods, the ones who refuse to take it, we are still God's children. We are still able to be identified as his children. We are the 144,000. This is why codes and things like numerology and understanding full history and research into everything is so important. You see, most of religion, Jehovah's Witnesses, a lot of theologians, they think it's certain religious sects and, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. But once again, God speaks in code, because he knew that man would get his dirty little hands into the Word of God and change it and try to control it. God always speaks in code, and the key to all of that is our DNA.
Your DNA is a right-handed double helix made up of these four things right here. And the helix is held together by sulfuric bonds that appear after every 10 pairs of nucleotides, every 5 pairs of nucleotides, every 6 pairs of nucleotides, and again, every 5 pairs of nucleotides. 10-5-6-5, 10-5-6-5, or in the Hebrew alphabet, Yod He Vav He, the signature of your creator, the signature of an artist under his painting, if you will. Now, the magic potion, if you actually read the patents, it is adding a triple helix, and it is adding more of this, which comes from a meteorite or a fallen star. And this 10-5-6-5, Yod He Vav He, the signature of your creator, quickly turns into 10-5-6-6-6-5. Do I have your attention yet?
Nucleic acids. These are bases in the structure of a DNA chain. By modern scientific standards, these are classified as A, T, C, and G. We'll talk about that in a moment. There is a sulfuric bridge that sometimes appears in the structure to hold the DNA chain together. The pattern of the bridge is 10 acids and then a bridge, 5 acids and then a bridge, 6 acids and then another bridge, and then 5 acids, and then finally the pattern continues. 10, 5, 6, 5. 10, 5, 6, 5. This happens trillions of times inside of your cells. What does this mean in ancient Hebrew? You see, in ancient Hebrew, every single letter is a number. And this doesn't take mystical Kabbalah. It doesn't take any kind of mystical gematria, as people have told us that we should use gematria and Kabbalah to understand the numerical values in Hebrew. No, this exists right in the Hebrew text. It exists right in the Psalms, right throughout the scriptures. You see that David numbered his Psalms with the Aleph Bet. Every single letter in alphabet of Hebrew is a number. And this is a biblical fact. Very important to understand. And in the scriptural Hebrew, in the ancient Hebrew and in the modern Hebrew, which is currently spoken even to this day, it is well known that the letter 10, or number 10 rather, which it is a letter, is Yod, that the 5 is Hey, that the 6 is Waw, and that the 5 is Hey. Over and over and over within yourselves, trillions of times, we see the pattern Yod, Hey, Waw, Hey, Yod, Hey, Waw, Hey, which is pronounced Yahuwah. This is the sacred name of the creator of the universe, appearing nearly 7,000 times in the ancient Hebrew text referred to as the Tanakh by Jews and the Old Testament by Christians.
What is that? It is a Hebrew text that has only been translated a couple of times by a couple of authors into English. It's so mysterious, George, that very few scholars even want to talk about it because they don't know what to say about it. It's a brief text. It's only about 2,000 lines. All right. And it is written as if an observer were present the day that the Creator created humankind, step by step. However, it's written in a language that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Is it like Genesis or totally different?
It's very different from Genesis. I think Genesis probably partially derived from this text, the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of creation. It literally translates to the book of creation. So it was as if someone were watching the Creator actually create the first person.
Doing what he did.
Doing what he did, but it is not written scientifically. The bottom line to what the text is saying is that through language, humankind was created. And that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Explain that.
If you take it literally. But as I began to follow the instructions as the author created them in this text, and this, George, this is the power of transcending the boundaries between science and spirituality. Because if a scientist only looked at the elements of life, you'd never make this discovery. If you only look at the spiritual text, you would never make this discovery. But it's by blending the two together and allowing them to tell the story. So we today in modern science, we talk about life as the result of elements, and we describe elements through word and through number. So we have the periodic table, for example, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon makes up the DNA of our bodies. Those are the words, and for every one of those words, there are a lot of numbers that may be applied. There are 17 different numeric parameters that go with each of those. So put that aside. When you go back into the ancient text and the Sefer Yetzirah specifically, they did exactly the same thing. They talked about the power of the letters of very specific alphabets. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to modern scholars until we begin to understand that every ancient alphabet, bar none, that I have found so far, has always from day one, with each letter, had a mysterious number associated with the letters. We don't know where the numbers came from. They never change. It's a unique numeric code. The study of that code is called gematria, and it was actually formalized. The laws, 32 laws of gematria, were formed in the 2nd century. They were formalized in the 2nd century. And the only way gematria works is you cannot deviate from these laws. There are specific laws that apply to the numbers. So our ancestors were also talking about life using words and numbers. So they had the letters of the alphabets and this mysterious number. We're using the periodic table. We got a whole bunch of numbers.
Right.
My job was to find out which of those numbers equates to the numbers in the ancient alphabets. And if I could do that, my thinking was it would be possible to look at human DNA, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and different combinations of that, and substitute the ancient letters for the numbers based upon this correlation. This, in retrospect, it was simple, but not knowing that, it took years. It took me 12 years.
And did you break it?
To find what we now know is that the atomic mass of the elements, the numbers of the atomic mass, are the numbers that equate to the mysterious letters in the ancient alphabets. What that means is when you look at human DNA, or the DNA of any life, it is made of hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and using gematria, the numbers that equate to those become 1, 5, 6, and 3. 3 is with the carbon. And when you then take a table, one of the ancient tables, and you're able to correlate those numbers with the letters, what we find, George, is that the human DNA our genome is built in layers. And at the top layers, it's like every book has an introduction. The introduction in every cell of every form of life. Carbon-based DNA, the introduction is the same. And the first translation literally reads, literal, God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. And God that is depicted in the DNA is actually spelled the way that the name of God was spelled in the ancient text before it was removed 6,800 times. In the Torah, for example, the sacred name of God is believed to be so sacred it cannot be written in its entirety.
Why put it in a code?
You know, this was, so first as a scientist, what I have to say is this. People say, why is the code there?
Yeah.
And I say, I don't know. All I know is that when I followed the instructions in a 3,000-year-old text and I applied it to the periodic table, this is what we have. Next question, is it a coincidence? So
There are no coincidences.
I had a statistician run the numbers for me, and the odds of this happening by chance are 1 to 234,256.
Yeah.
234,256 to 1 are the odd, or 0.00041%.
Right.
Those are the odds that it's just
random.
Just random. Now, those aren't astronomical odds. I thought it might be like 1 to a bajillion, you know. But when you take into account,
They're still high.
Not only is the language there, but when you take into account what the words say, that those words actually have meaning, God eternal within the body.
And they all say that.
The first letter in all human DNA, if you can look at what's called the genetic code, CTAG, every one of those is made up of combinations of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and they are arranged, I don't want to be really technical when I talk about this, but they're arranged different numbers of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen atoms. So within each of the DNA bases that make our DNA as it is, there are different combinations of CTAG that break down to different combinations of God eternal within the body. And the God within our cells, within our DNA, is literally the same spelling of the God that was taken from those texts. Now here's the beauty, I just have to say this.
Right.
My first fear was I found it in the Hebrew language, and I said, does that mean, could it actually be divisive if it only is found in one language? And when the research went to its fruition, what we found is it is in Hebrew and Aramaic and Sanskrit, 3 of the root languages.
The same thing.
Exactly the same thing. So in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Sanskrit, the code for those letters translates precisely the same in the human DNA. That's the first layer.
Did you know there's a hidden secret Bible code found in the Bible? Make sure to share this video so that we can possibly get another beautiful soul on the other side of this screen on the right direction to Jesus and hopefully enter into the kingdom of heaven. In Genesis chapter 5, there is a genealogy of names. Here are the names: Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. Now, if you look at what all these names mean in Hebrew, it says, the man appointed mortal sorrow, the blessed God, shall come down teaching. His death shall bring despairing comfort and rest. This message perfectly describes the life of Jesus, perfectly written out thousands of years before he came to the earth, proving that the Bible is real and the Bible is the written word of God.
Who or what or how, but the evidence is overwhelming that there is an intentionality and a design that underlies our existence. So as a scientist, my thinking was, if that's true, who or whatever put us here on earth would have left something inside of every one of us that tells us we're part of a greater existence and tells us that we're a family and that we're not so different from one another. And if I could find that, if I could find that common denominator, that somehow maybe it would help us to become greater than the differences, that began the search. And I combined the science that I know of biology and history and ancient language, linguistics, genetics, with the new science of computers that were now on my desktop. And Daryl, I'll tell you, I remember the very first time as a scientist that I had the opportunity to see the human genome, a piece of human DNA coded on my computer screen. And all the CTAG, it all rolled down through the screen. And my brain looked at that. And I remember thinking, I said, I don't know what that says, but there's a code. There's a language. That DNA is a language. And whatever that language is, it's inside of me and it's inside of everyone that looks at it. And some intelligent being placed it there a long time ago. And when we make the connections between the letters of the ancient alphabets, the numbers they represent, those numbers, if we look at them on the periodic table, they happen to be precisely the elements that make the DNA in our bodies. Now, we have the ability to take the sequences of DNA in a cell and through those numbers link them to letters in ancient alphabets. And lo and behold, the letters spell words and the words have meaning. And this has led to a book that's entitled The God Code. It was released in the year 2004. What we know is that there is a message, an intentional message within the DNA of all life. The message occurs in layers, and each layer has its own code that must be understood for that layer. The top layer is one that we understand very well right now. The top layer in the DNA of all life literally translates into the words God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. We don't know who put that message there. We don't know exactly why it's there. But I can tell you that all I did was I followed the instructions in a series of ancient texts, following those languages, and I married that with the science of today, and this is what we found.
Want to know why I recently got that tattoo? There was a moment when Moses found the courage to ask God what his name was. God was gracious enough to answer. In the version of the Bible that you read, it probably says that God's name is I Am, but the name he gave is recorded in the original Hebrew, YHWH. Over time, we added an A and an E to get YAHWEH, presumably because we have a preference for vowels. But scholars and rabbis have noticed that the letters YHWH represents breathing sounds or aspirated consonants. When pronounced without intervening vowels, it sounds like breathing. YH is the inhale, WH is the exhale. So a baby's first cry, his first breath, speaks the name of God. A deep sigh calls his name, or a groan or a gasp that is too heavy for mere words mentions God's name. Even atheists speak his name, unaware that their very breath is giving acknowledgement to God. Likewise, a person leaves this earth with their last breath when God's name is no longer filling their lungs. So when you can't utter anything else, your cry is calling out to God. Your cry is saying his name. Being alive means we speak his name constantly. Your very breathing is giving God praise. God chose to give himself a name that we can't help but speak every moment we're alive. All of us, always, everywhere, walking, sleeping, breathing, with the name of God on our lips. Now share this cool story with someone.